commercial risk, and that's sort of those sorts of ideas about, how hard do you push yourselves? What sort of, how big a bet do you take when you've got certain cash runway and you've got a potential opportunity over here to maybe we should build that other thing, and service that other opportunity. Those are really, really hard decisions. I think, day to day, the one thing just coming back to, I guess, how Jonathan and I work together, we both have the sort of co-CEO role. And so we often sort of talk about it as almost kind of being upper house and lower house. Like, we challenge each other's thinking. We continuously kind of question in a really productive way each other's thinking and each other's views on a given decision or on a given opportunity. And I think, that's been really, really important for us. We bootstrapped from 2016. We've been incredibly capital efficient. We've made loads of mistakes, like, don't get me wrong, but I think we've been able to minimize the kind of really big, costly kind of commercial mistakes. And I think that's, that comes down to how we work together on a day-to-day basis.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 134 of the Startup Playbook podcast. I'm your host Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they use to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. I'm delighted to have the co-founder and co-CEO of Open and Huddle Insurance, Jason Wilby, as my guest for this episode. In 2016, Jason and his co-founder launched Huddle, Open's direct-to-consumer brand, which is now Australia's most popular tech-driven insurance company. The tech developed for Huddle is now the foundation for Open's B2B solution, an AI-powered platform that makes financial services more open, less costly, and more reliable for consumers. To date, Open has raised $24 million in funding, including a $3.1 million Series A extension round led by AirTree. We covered a wide range of topics in this interview, including building and managing risk when growing startups, how to find and assess the right partners and investors for your business, building and implementing company culture based on shared values, Open's journey to raising $24 million in funding, and much more. Without further ado, here is my interview with Jason Wilby. Jason, welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Thank you, Rohit. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to talking this morning.
Likewise. So Jason, for those people that may not be as familiar with you or your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Sure. So I guess we're best known for Huddle, which is our tech-powered and purpose-driven car, home and travel insurance. And within Huddle, our key technology innovations include instant claims, usage-based car insurance, and we basically made a really simple AI-powered customer experience to hopefully simplify insurance. We're also very focused on ensuring that financial services align with customer and community outcomes, which is why we're a proud B Corp. And I guess, in summary, all of that seems to be working quite well. We ticked over 50,000 policies this year. We're seeing record growth, and we're about to launch our first major white label in Australia under our B2B brand, Open.
Fantastic. And obviously there's so much that I want to cover on, especially you touched on the B Corp side of things as well, which, I think is a really interesting perspective from an insurance company as well. But I guess just going back, I had the sort of good fortune of speaking to a couple of people close to you prior to this interview. And there's a few interesting stories that I picked out. One was, obviously Jonathan, who was who went on to become your co-founder with Open as well. He was telling me, the story about sort of how you were both working together. He also told me that you both launched an app called Fussy as a starting point. Do you want to share a little bit about what that sort of process was like, and I guess how that initial sort of working relationship between you and Jonathan came about?
That is a blast from the past. I'd forgotten about that almost. Firstly, so Jonathan, we were working in management consulting, mostly sort of strategic design, and Jonathan's, computer science and data science and strategy. And we would, more often than not, our projects were how might we create, new products and services or on behalf of clients, IAG, Westpac, and the like. And Fussy, I think the genesis was at the time, maybe I was single and we had quite a few probably single friends. And I think the sort of ongoing conversation was, I guess, in the world of, Tinder and alike, the sort of paradox of choice. You go, lots of people, lots of dating. How do you know when you found the right person? And so I guess that maybe we should have stuck with this. It's quite, now I'm casting my mind back. It's definitely different to insurance. But I guess the genesis for Fussy was, how can we help people make better decisions when it comes to, or at least kind of think through the decisions they're trying to make? If you go on 20 dates with 20 potential suitors, how do you know when you've met the I guess the Mr. or Mrs. Right. How do you know when to stop going through that dating process when Tinder seems to have, an endless stream of other potential suitors? So Fussy was an app designed to help people, I guess, sort of think through what's their market size. This is our management consulting minds coming to the dating problem. So you could sort of interact with it, and you could say, hey, I'm an Australian girl in Australia. I like girls. I like people this sort of, shape, size, these sorts of attributes. And it would basically just slim down your market and give you a kind of a way to visualize and explore potentially what the market size was for your potential suitors. And I think it's interesting because it was the starting point for us really deciding we wanted to work together. It was a side project, something we did more for fun than anything else. We certainly didn't sell it, but we did build it, and we had a pretty cool working design and proof of concept. But I think through that process, we decided that actually we kind of wanted to play in financial services. We spent a long time in that space, and we realized we wanted to work together. We wanted to build something that was big and valuable and solve some real problems. But actually, perhaps there were some really worthwhile problems closer to home in amidst some of the work we were doing at the time.
Yeah, obviously finding the right co-founder, I love the thinking behind Fussy in terms of, how do you find the right partner? And it's very much the same when you're trying to find a co-founder for your startup as well. You mentioned that, I guess after your experience of building that together, you sort of realized that you both started to work, that you both wanted to work together. What were, I guess, some of the things that sort of came across from building that project, or some of the things that you kind of learned from working together that indicated to you that you were both the sort of right partners for each other?
I think there's lots of, there would be all the explicit things, you'd have discussions about what your goals might be or what one might want to achieve. And we did those things. I always remember quite vividly sitting down in a cafe in Bondi, and it's sort of somewhat cliche, but we knew that we wanted to create a business together, and we were talking about it, and we wrote down literally on a napkin, I think it was, but it was kind of like, again, management consulting. Well, if we were to do a business, what would our three kind of pillars, or what would our four kind of non-negotiables be? And I think we genuinely just enjoyed working together. We had fun. We had a sense of humor. We didn't take things too seriously when they didn't need to be taken too seriously. And so we said, well, if we're going to do stuff together, let's continue to ensure that happens. Let's continue to to have some fun. We also wanted to do. I think we'd seen and worked on projects, and at some point in our careers had those sort of feelings of, this project is just about selling more soulless widgets, or just selling something that perhaps didn't feel like it had any kind of real sort of sense of purpose in the world. And so we didn't really have a very evolved idea of what that meant, and that sort of came later when we discovered B Corp. But we one of our kind of non-negotiables was, let's do something that does more good than harm, and let's ensure that we feel happy about what we're doing. And the third was, let's make money. We're happy capitalists. It's quite a good model, drives quite a lot of positive outcomes for the world. It's if it's not harnessed and correctly managed, it can do some harm. But generally, it's okay in our view to make profit. So those are kind of our three non-negotiables. But I think and our kind of our explicit alignment. But I think in actual fact, a lot of it just came down to working together, realizing that we could challenge and debate each other. That we weren't. I don't think either of us. I think we were pretty happy that neither party was likely to go mental. You hear some of those stories about co-founders that just sort of spin out, and they everything ends in a big crash and a big mess. I think we'd had enough kind of debates. We'd realised that we sort of had humour on our side and kind of a lot of mutual respect for each other. That meant I guess we both felt. You'd only known each other for a year or two, perhaps at that time, but very high confidence that we could work together and create value together.
Jonathan had also told me that story about sitting down at a cafe in Bondi and writing down the three pillars at the back of a napkin. But to my understanding, although you had those kind of shared values, there wasn't a very clear indication of what you wanted to build next. Do you mind, again, sharing what that sort of process looks like? Because I'm sure that there are some founders or future founders that are listening to this podcast at the moment that have this intention to build, but not necessarily knowing what that next step is. What did that process look like for you and Jonathan, from, I guess, sitting in that cafe and writing down those shared values of what you wanted to build to actually launching what is now Huddle and Open?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. I think, in some ways you can sort of post-rationalize, and almost, again, there was a process and we sort of wanted to whittle down all of these ideas, and perhaps another sort of, I guess, lens is we were lucky to be kind of in front of some opportunities at the right time, having decided that we wanted to do something together. I find myself today, you're going to dinner parties or meeting new people, and you sort of explain, you sort of created an insurance company. People are like, how do you do that? And you're like, sometimes I don't know, is the honest answer. But I mean, it's certainly, and I think it comes back to this idea of having decided that we wanted to build something together. We wanted to build, a grand business that we could be proud of, that solved, valuable problems. It is somewhat opportunistic that we were very much at that time entrenched in financial services, working with, some of the largest financial service companies in Australia, seeing firsthand the problems that those businesses faced in terms of responding to shifting customer needs and customer demands and regulatory issues, but also actually seeing, because of the work we were doing, we spent a lot of time with customers. And so actually really understanding some of the problems from a customer perspective as well. And I think it really came to us, I guess the opportunity in insurance stood out to us so much, because fundamentally insurance is an information business. And so there we were sort of looking at all of these problems, unreliable customer experiences, challenges to run an insurance business. And ultimately we were scratching our heads and saying, well, insurance, it's just an information business. Insurance companies, they don't fix cars and houses. They don't. They authorize other people to do so. They need to make decisions really quickly. So we had that data point, and then we had the other data point, which was insurance companies had some of the lowest levels across the world, the lowest levels of tech investment. McKinsey, BCG, everybody's writing, even today, still writing the same reports, that insurance is a laggard when it comes to the adoption and investment in technology. And then the third sort of data point was, as I said, what we were seeing from customers, really unreliable experience, which always sort of struck us a chord with us, because insurance sort of from a customer perspective felt like a very unloved product and category. Yet at its core, it sounds cheesy, but it's pretty amazing. It is literally people putting money in a pot and sharing when bad things happen. And so that's what drew us in. We didn't exactly know how we were going to attack it on day one. We started in 2016 very much with a bootstrap mindset of saying, let's get the ability to play in this space, to create product, to sell products, and to understand those problems more deeply. But it was those kind of three data points that drew us in at the outset.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's never a straight line or a clear process around those sort of things. To my understanding, there was also Auxilio Ventures in between, which is still operational. Is that right?
Yes, that was our consulting business. So we met consulting with working with another team, and then we founded Auxilio Ventures. Really, it was our vehicle, I suppose, between sort of, I guess, large kind of corporate sort of consulting, and knowing that we wanted to do something together. We created Auxilio to continue to consult and pay the bills, whilst also building the team effectively, and some of the capabilities that would go on to become to spin out into Open and Huddle. In fact, our very first engineer is still with us today and was part of the Auxilio Ventures journey, for example.
So speaking of Auxilio, I spoke to Louisa McKay, who, to my understanding, also runs Auxilio Ventures at the moment as well.
That's right.
Yeah, and one of the stories that she told me, which I think is such a great analogy of, I guess, trying to learn to build a startup as well, was I think you had decided that you wanted to do the Sydney to Hobart race, and you'd never sailed before.
Yes.
And she mentioned that you sort of, essentially learned how to sail, became a skipper, and not only did you do the race, but you also finished ninth. Do you want to talk a little bit about what, I guess, that sort of experience was like, and I guess where that really sort of came from for you?
Yeah, that was a good experience. I'd sort of grown up on the Isle of Wight in the UK and been exposed and dabbled in a few little sails, just jumping on boats without really knowing what you're doing. So it's a big sort of sailing community in the UK, and sailed a little bit in Australia. Again, sailing is something you spend your whole life kind of mastering. I think if you jump on a boat and someone says that they know everything, jump off again. And so I think it was about 2014. I decided I really wanted to do some ocean racing, kind of push to some other limits. I think at the time maybe 2014 would have been, I guess, sort of going through those early 30s questions, perhaps. I want to sail around the world and all those sorts of things. And managed to get a spot on a Hobart boat, which is you race for a whole winter season. Hobart is the sort of seventh of a series of races. And at the same time decided to get my skipper's ticket so that I could become you learn more about navigation and perhaps and try to become the most valuable person you can be within the crew, and went all in. I think every weekend and every evening you had to do radio certificates. You had to do sea survival courses. Basically crammed in what many people might do over sort of 5 years into one season, and learned a heck of a lot. Also learned a lot about risk. And coming ninth in the Sydney to Hobart means you've got to be prepared to take a lot of risk as a, with your boat and with your crew, which is not my decision there. It was the skipper's decision, and learn a lot about, I guess, perhaps being more explicit and really understanding risks you're taking. It's incredible to be a incredible privilege to be part of a crew that achieves a ninth place position, and incredible kind of seeing how all of the the boat managers and the professional crew members manage risk. The campaign starts 6 months before the race, sort of thing, and it's an incredible kind of balancing act between pushing too hard and not pushing hard enough against your competitors.
Yeah, and obviously that's something that we sort of often hear a lot about things from a startup perspective as well, in terms of really sort of pushing towards growth and finding that right balancing act between pushing really far but not wanting to tip over the edge and kill the business or the race. How did that sort of shape your perspective? Or when you talk about risk, like some of the things that you learned about taking that risk, how do you sort of approach that from business or from a sailing perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if we're yet at kind of peak risk. I mean, just from a commercial risk management perspective, I mean, we're an insurance business. So we've had to learn a heck of a lot about kind of risk management to ensure that we are always there to meet the needs of our customers, and information security and all those sorts of things. Commercial risk, and that's those sorts of ideas about how hard do you push yourselves? What sort of how big a bet do you take when you've got certain cash runway and you've got a potential opportunity over here to maybe we should build that other thing and service that other opportunity. Those are really, really hard decisions. I think, day to day, the one thing just coming back to, I guess, how Jonathan and I work together, we both have the sort of co-CEO role. And so we often sort of talk about it as almost kind of being upper house and lower house. Like, we challenge each other's thinking. We continuously kind of question in a really productive way each other's thinking and each other's views on a given decision or on a given opportunity. And I think that's been really, really important for us. We bootstrapped from 2016. We've been incredibly capital efficient. We've made loads of mistakes, like, don't get me wrong, but I think we've been able to minimize the kind of really big, costly kind of commercial mistakes. And I think that's that comes down to how we work together on a day-to-day basis. We also have a really good board as well. So we have AirTree, who are there to almost kind of push that. Why only ninth place? Come on, what about seventh place or sixth place? The master will be fine. There's kind of, I mean, they're there in a really sort of productive way to kind of push us, I think, and challenge us and challenge strategy and challenge our thinking and keep us kind of honest to our original ambition, which is to build a grand business that we can be proud of. And Hollard, who the third seat on our board, really, and our core underwriting and insurance partner, almost at the other end of the spectrum, they're the safe insurance hands kind of. Yes, you could do that. Just be aware that you'll also have to ensure that you've got these capabilities in place before you go too far down that track. So I think we're lucky, because I think the co-CEO role is really, really productive and actually a really clever way to keep sort of some checks and balances and sort of push each other, but also kind of challenge each other. And we have a really good board as well, which I'm really grateful of.
Yeah, I definitely want to loop back to, I guess, the decision to share the CEO positions and especially kind of talk about some of the structure that you have internally within sort of Huddle and Open as well. But speaking about risk, one of the ways of mitigating against that risk is obviously knowing your space inside out. And, you mentioned that you and Jonathan both came from a really deep background in financial services, and it's something that you both knew very well. Maybe a little bit more than fussy the dating apps that are provided. But one of the things that Louisa mentioned was that, to her, it felt like you were born to essentially run an insurance tech startup, which, I guess sometimes might be a little bit easier for other people. And especially when it's, when you sort of look back on that, it might be a little bit easier to connect the dots. But I guess, what was that? Was there a particular insight or a particular moment for you and Jonathan that led you to go, these are the three pillars that we wanted to build, and actually we want to do this in insurance. This is the opportunity that we've sort of identified and decided to go after.
Yeah, I think as you sort of asking the question there, I think even from the outset, we were already sort of thinking, a lot of the thinking, the way Jonathan and I operate is often sort of, thinking through most issues together at some point in the day. And I think even at the outset, we were approaching this together. And it was, there are there are just kind of, I guess there are some innate skill sets there that probably are valuable in insurance. You go, Jonathan is a brilliant mind in terms of being able to think through data problems, being able to think through optimization, and insurance is an information business. And we're talking about building an entire business that requires us to rethink how information is used to optimize every decision from quote to claim. That's not my skill set. And I think there are all sorts of decisions there, decisions that impact the business, decisions that impact the customer outcomes. And then ultimately, just at a really, really core level, most insurance is bought based on price. And being able to think about how you can make insurance more affordable for customers requires an outlier kind of instinct and mindset and skill set to be able to manage and think through problems with data. I guess at the other end of the spectrum, what we had to do was think about how we reinvent customer experiences and how we might think about, I guess, making insurance simple. Most people actually find insurance very, very complicated. It's a complicated experience, it's unreliable, and it's hard to know what you're getting when you buy it. It's hard to know what's going to happen come claims time. And I think the other kind of thing that I think we brought to the table is just this kind of unrelenting view on how might we improve things from a customer outcomes perspective, which really requires, it's the opposite end of the spectrum to kind of data and science and engineering. It's like, how do we just continuously simplify things and make it so that everybody and anybody can access the benefits of insurance? I think those are probably the two kind of capabilities and that perhaps Louisa was thinking about when she made those comments.
Again, we've sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, but you sort of run both Huddle and Open. One is a direct-to-consumer business, and one's very much a B2B focused business as well. And to my understanding, was the vision always to I guess build towards the B2B, or what is now Open? Was I guess, walk me through what that sort of process was like in terms of the grand vision of what you wanted to build, and I guess what was the initial sort of building block of building the business or businesses?
Sure. We always, we founded the company in 2016 as Open, and I think the genesis there was we spent a long time in insurance. We also sort of looking at the periphery financial services as well. You can see trends for open banking, more data sharing, and just a general kind of orientation on our perspective that financial services needed to become, I guess, more transparent and more reliable through greater use of technology and interoperability. So that was kind of that was us expressing, I guess, our view of the future. But we got going with Huddle. We wanted to, because coming back to that kind of initial piece, we wanted to be able to get into market, sell insurance, understand firsthand what it's like to sell insurance, to deal with complaints, to deal with claims, to deal with fraud. And we had a fair bit of hubris on some of those topics. We were kind of like, we're going to solve fraud, just need the data. And you actually go through it firsthand and you realize actually detecting fraud is 10% of the issue. It's really about how do you manage it once you've detected it, and really complicated problems that you can only start to understand by experiencing them. So Huddle was a really important part of our learning and understanding the opportunity to use technology to solve problems in insurance. It also, though, is a great business. Like, it's growing, it's got really, we can generate underwriting profit, we've got good unit economics, but it is an expensive business to grow. Acquisition costs are quite high, so it's quite capital consuming. And we had always, back in the outset, the back of our minds, always thought about some form of B2B play. It's quite hard to grow a consumer brand in financial services really, really quickly. And so we'd always sort of left this idea on the table about, at some point we will take Open into some sort of B2B proposition. And that came about I guess it started to come to fruition in about a year ago, actually, November last year, when we first decided, having had so many people come to us and say, hey, we like what you're doing with Huddle. We would like all of that technology and all of those customer experiences to be in our car insurance or our home insurance. And so about that time, we decided that what we would do is we would actually we would enable brands who sort of share our values to white label our products. And so very soon, hopefully this side of Christmas, we'll see a very large Australian listed brand go live with car and home insurance, which is powered by Open. So what that means is we've been able to develop our car and home insurance product and deploy it through another brand, powered by our technology with our award-winning experiences. But effectively, the other brand is the channel for growth. So they're able to offer that alongside their other core services. And I think what's exciting for us is it enables us to grow with a different capital profile. Driving acquisition on a brand that you own it just has a different kind of cycle from a capital perspective. And growing with other brands through partnerships, it enables us to it broadens our channels, I guess, and it enables us to grow and increase our growth without relying on so much capital if we were just focused on Huddle, which is pretty exciting for us. And I think also I guess we're looking ahead at other markets now, and you know, having the B2B opportunity and the partnership opportunity is a key enabler for us to grow in other markets.
Was there again, so you mentioned that, you know, particular businesses were sort of reaching out to you. You know, I guess one of the things that has come up quite a few times on the podcast is, you know, oftentimes, especially when you're operating business, the challenge isn't trying to find opportunities. It's how do you say yes to the right ones and no to the rest, and trying to find the right time for those sort of things as well. I guess, what did that sort of look like for you in deciding that now was the right time to launch the B2B side of the business?
That's a very big topic. I think we can spend an hour in there. Actually, as you're asking the question, I almost sort of feel like putting it out to the audience as well, because if there are other people that it's a complicated problem to solve. I think it's very easy to sort of say, well, let's create a framework and we'll put every opportunity that comes past through a framework. I don't think any organization, if people are truthful, ever really sort of stick to those frameworks. But I would like to. I'm still keen to see some of them if there are good ones out there. I mean, there are two decisions I guess in our two big strategic decisions for us. One is what's the right time to embark on the open journey and bring that in alongside Huddle. And I think that the challenge there is go too early and we're taking capital and oxygen away from Huddle, and go too late and we would be effectively opening up that market and letting somebody else come in as a challenger. Huddle's over here creating demand for all of these new experiences and a new way to sell and manage insurance, and someone else could potentially come and sort of fill that vacuum. So I think we felt we wanted to be able to get into that space at the right, not too late, I suppose. And towards the end of last year, our core technology had become very, I guess, mature, and so it felt as though it was the right time to start to make some investments. It was only a small build for us really to be able to enable this, and so at the time the timing was right to be able to start on that process. I think the biggest challenge that we've had is in our space is actually deciding which partners to work with. And so, the first lens we would always look through is there strong values alignment? Are we working with partners here who really care about their customers and good outcomes for their customers? Because if that's not there, then we can just stop there, and that's easy. That's sort of an easier part. But the other challenge we found, just being really, I guess, open, is that lots of people would like to get into insurance, and we learned firsthand through Huddle that it actually is quite hard to sell insurance. It's it is. As much as we simplified and we've all of the investments we made in improving the experience, and we get thousands of great reviews, all those sorts of things, it is fundamentally, it's a high consideration product. Our average selling price is north of $750. So it's quite a high consideration product, and it's a very competitive product. So there are big brands pumping lots and lots of money into acquisition, so it's very, very competitive to acquire a customer. And so I think that part of the challenge for us over the last year, as we're sort of new in this space, in the B2B space, is actually trying to figure out which partners are where we double down in partnerships. Actually has been part of the challenge, and I'm sure other listeners perhaps have had similar experiences. You're right, often opportunities can be coming in like a tsunami. Trying to work out which ones you can and can't respond to is a big challenge.
Another aspect of that, I guess, a pretty big decision like that is not just, building that conviction for yourself, but also trying to bring the rest of the stakeholders on board. Again, what did that sort of process look like, or what can you kind of share about that process in terms of internally getting the board or even your staff and your team members sort of brought into this, I guess, new focus or new area for the business?
Yeah, I think just starting with the team, luckily we're still relatively small. We're still not quite 50 people. And so, and it's very much, I often describe it as a bit of a maker culture. It comes from this sort of bootstrap background. Everybody involved in our business has pretty much had to learn and really sort of learn firsthand about insurance. And so it's a very, very hands-on kind of culture, one where people are very empowered to, guess, create things and also make mistakes. And then, and I think, for us introducing open, I think it was about this time last year, we probably had a deck, and we were sort of, conceptually, Jonathan and I had sort of, thought it through. We were able to share that deck with our teams. And I mean, I can look at it now and sort of see things in a pre-sale space. And our teams have actually made that a reality. Built technology, we've got SDKs, APIs, all sorts of settings that partners have requested that have been built and shipped, and happy partners. If I'm honest, there are many features in there that I probably don't fully understand. So I would sort of reflect and say that probably wasn't much of a challenge in terms of, the business case made sense, the opportunity made sense, people were energized about it, and they're empowered to build it and make it happen. And I think from a board perspective, I guess the opportunity was, it was very obvious. Obvious, again, coming back to the makeup of our board, Hollard have experience and they can see the opportunity. Then they know the benefits of growing with brands and getting into this space. In fact, they refer opportunities to us, which is a great. We're very aligned, I guess. And I think it was just something we were able to sort of talk through and agree what steps we would take going forward. It wasn't a revolution; it was more like switching on some technology in reality for us.
And one of the things that I love that you sort of mentioned in terms of when you were trying to find the right partners was finding people with shared values. And it's definitely something that came across in a lot of my conversations and research for this interview as well, is the intense focus that you and Jonathan have in terms of the positive impact that you have and kind of leading with purpose. Part of that process was obviously, being a registered B Corp as well, which I think, to my understanding, Huddle and Open are the only insurance companies to have B Corp status in Australia.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes, that's correct. I haven't fact checked it this month, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. That's still correct.
Yeah. Well, according to my limited research, I think that's accurate as well. But again, sort of going back to I guess you and Jonathan sort of writing that down as one of the core pillars of what you both wanted to build moving forward. What does that sort of look like in terms of implementing that into the culture and to the way that you sort of operate the business on a day-to-day business?
Yeah, that's something that we've experienced a lot of recently. We've just going through recertification now, and when you've got a business that's sort of grown as fast as we have over the last 4 years, it's an entirely different business to recertify. So, achieving B Corp status when I think we were, probably it was really, really early on. We were probably fewer than 10 people, maybe fewer, certainly fewer than 15, I think. And so, very, very low levels of complexity. We can have an intent and we can make decisions as a very small team, and we can generally kind of see exactly what's happening within our business. Policies are a fairly sort of short, stack of documents, and letting B Corp audit our P&L and audit kind of our structures. Very simple process. Fast forward to recertification in 2020, I think it's been a 6-month project with 2 of our team members, not dedicated full time, but 2 people managing that as a project and a program of work over 6 months. And it's and rightly so. That when we became a B Corp, again, there's an idea on a napkin. Let's do some good. It's quite naive and not too differentiating. Most people would say that, I think, if they were asked. Becoming a B Corp was, for us, was all about accessing toolkits and a measurement model to actually, effectively, stand behind our words, and then ultimately have an independent kind of audit process to see whether we are standing behind our words. And B Corp isn't about being perfect; it's about being better. It's not saying you are perfect, you're gold standard of ethical business. It's saying, in general, you're better. You're making decisions. You're setting policies. You're moving in a direction that is better than certainly better than average, and generally better. And most importantly, you're measuring your impact, because you can't talk about whether you're doing good or bad if you don't measure it. And it's across all stakeholders: customers, the community, your supply chain, and planet. So it's a really robust framework, and one that we take a lot of pride in, I think, because it just comes back to that insight. It's easy to say we want to do good. This is all about measuring it and holding ourselves to account. But yeah, in 2020, that's been a very, very different experience to 2017. And the scrutiny increases as well as we become a bigger business. B Corp and B Labs work harder to hold us to account. They dig deeper into our financials. They dig deeper into our measurements, methodologies, requesting our policies, interviewing our staff and our team. And again, I sort of say quite rightly so, that's what it's all about. But yeah, it becomes a bigger investment over time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, like you said, I think there's a lot of things like this that come from a good place of intention of, we want to build a business that does good. But I think a large part of that is how that is implemented. And again, one of the people that I spoke to was James Cameron, who's a venture partner at AirTree, also from a podcast guest. And I think he's a board member that sits on the board for you as well. And he was showing me around virtually showing me around the office, because I'm in Melbourne and I can't see any offices at the moment, but virtually showing me around the open office. And you've got I think the B Corp certification up on the wall. He was even telling me about the way that you source your coffees in the office as well is very sort of sustainable and ethical and all those sort of things as well. But I guess for you, from taking that as a core pillar and implementing that, what are things that you do to implement that as part of the culture on a day-to-day basis? And I guess similarly, surrounding yourself with that from a team perspective, what are things that you sort of look for when hiring to make sure that the people that are coming on board to join you share those values as well?
Yeah, so I think one just reflecting on culture, one thing that immediately comes to mind, and it's a very large part of the B Corp philosophy as well, is a focus on transparency. And it's something that kind of connects everything we do. When we started out in 2016, we had a belief that insurance needed to become more transparent. It was quite opaque. When we discovered B Corp, a core kind of tenet of the B Corp kind of philosophy is the idea of transparency. You shouldn't have anything to hide. Open book accounting. One of the things they encourage you to do is open your P&L to all of your staff and all of your team members. Why would you not? What have you got to hide, sort of thing? And funnily enough, we called our company Open. So I think one of the things that underpins everything that we do is, our view is not, we don't recruit people to say, hey, what do you think about fossil fuels? And if your view is here or here, therefore that determines your fit for this business. What we really focus on is finding people who share our view that business can be used as a force for good, that every person and every company can strive to do better, to achieve better outcomes for all stakeholders, but also to have a realistic view that say there are a lot of complicated problems to solve, and there are often competing demands between different stakeholders. And what we need to do is build teams who can, debate and analyze and solve problems with rigor. And let's all ensure that we do so in a way that's really transparent. The transparency piece, though, I just think is just worth touching on a few seconds more. We really are committed to that. We run an all teams meeting on every Monday of every week, where effectively team and project leads come and we just like an extended stand up. But anybody in the company, no matter who you are, can attend that meeting by video and jump in. And we discuss pretty much everything and anything, from what we're thinking about doing about options and REM and comp, through to projects that need to be delivered for partners, through to disputes and issues that may unfortunately have arisen with customers and customer claims, for example. And we have we use our all hands on a Friday of every week as a more kind of structured everybody in the company attend session that Jonathan and I generally lead with help from our teams. Again, where people who have joined us have made comments such as, you really share a lot. I'm not used to people sharing that much information. We were going through COVID along with every other business at the onset, and Jonathan and I were sharing with our entire company the scenarios we were modeling. What happens if churn rate increases to here and new business falls to this point? Will we have to take these are the things we're considering, 20% salary cuts. We really don't want to have to lose people, but this is what it would look like if we had to. Really, really, really high levels of transparency, because ultimately that's just coming back to one of the stakeholder groups, which is our people and our teams. We believe that's the best way to ensure that we're sort of minimizing any negative impacts and effectively maximizing their agency and their opportunity within this business. So transparency thing. Long-winded way of saying it, I think.
No, I think what you mentioned is, absolutely right. I'm just wondering, in terms of when you are hiring, when you're going through the hiring process, are there particular things that you like, indicators or things that you're looking for in terms of their background or things that they've done that allow you to make sure that they not just fit the cultural values, but as you said, sort of, have that sort of rigor and have that ability to sort of question things as well? Is there, again, are there particular things that you or Jonathan or I guess in the hiring process that you do to help filter out and make sure that you're identifying the right people for the business?
I think the key, we generally, we always talk about hiring problem solvers, and I guess we are lean. We are very focused. We are very proud of being very capital efficient and being very lean. We're proud of our kind of bootstrapper maker culture. I think in our hiring process, the most important thing is for us or any hiring manager in the business to be, I guess, absolutely convinced that someone joining the business can solve problems and effectively build things. Whether that's building something in marketing, or building something from a technology perspective, or building a process, or building a way of working. We have had people join us in the past from large organizations who do a 10-page deck and go, I've got the idea, I've solved the problem. Can you make it happen? and you go, that's great when you're in a large 40,000 person organization and you pass it to the centralized project management team, and suddenly it vanishes and may or may not get made happen. In our world, the most important thing we look for is the ability to solve problems, and that requires people to be able to think through problems from many different perspectives, using different models or different modes of thinking, but then ultimately to be able to to tap into that kind of inner maker and be able to use a bit of creativity, even if it's sketching something out so that a developer can understand it and build it. We expect people to be able to have an element of craft as well.
Speaking of problem solving and creativity, we've touched on the fact that you run sort of direct to consumer and a B2B business. Really curious to know, I guess, what are some of the things that are shared learning? So things that you can, I guess, share and kind of pool resources. What are things that are a little bit different in terms of operating the two businesses? And I'm also, in terms of transparency, just a fan of asking multi-part questions, so bear with me. I guess what are the similarities and differences when you're sort of operating the two? And then also, how do you sort of think about structuring the team as a result of doing that? And what are the ways that you sort of overcome some of the hurdles?
Sure. So B2B is, it's relatively new for us still. So I think we're certainly not optimal in that space. It's just a reality. It's new. We're on that journey. Our largest B2B partner is imminently going live, and we've got some smaller ones who are live and with whom we've had some experience. We've also there's white labeling. We've also introduced open up a channel to insurance brokers and traditional brokers to enable them to sell our products. Probably a whole other podcast in that. And so, but both of those are, I guess, in that sort of B2B space. I think one of the things that seems strikingly obvious, but I think we had to experience is I guess everything we learned about selling insurance B2C is us interacting with the customer. It's all absolutely really, really useful in the B2B setting, because either we have to coach a brand on how to engage with customers, how to solve problems for their customers, how and when to talk about insurance. And we've learned that firsthand. It's sort of like, well, we grow this business over here. Now we can share those learnings and insights with you. Or with brokers who perhaps actually, they spend even more time, perhaps, as many of them are very experienced with customers. We're able to share, I guess, a lot of our learnings and insights about technology and the direct space, though perhaps in some cases they know a bit more about insurance than we do. So I think there's a lot we're able to share. We're able to bring a lot of our insights and a lot of our learnings from our B2C business to create a lot of value for our B2B partners, effectively B2B2C partners, those who are on selling our products, maximizing their success. So I think that's been, sort of sounds obvious. We've experienced that firsthand now, and you go, wow, that's actually really valuable, and it's sort of, I would say, clever, but it's not. We just happen to be in this situation and realizing it, but it's definitely advantageous. And I think one of the ways we've been able to capitalize on that is because we haven't split teams. We have pretty much everybody in our organization works across both of those channels in one way or another, whether it's our operational teams who support both Huddle customers and white label brand customers. We have a very small but productive growth team, and Lockie in particular can work across both, I guess both Huddle projects and open projects. And the same, when it comes down to products and engineering, and what we call insurance ops. So insurance ops is effectively the operationalization of pricing and underwriting and product and design. So we haven't yet split those things based on channel, and I think reluctant to do so, given that there's so much advantage in being able to apply insights from different channels to be able to either help drive customer outcomes or drive better outcomes for our partners.
Speaking of insights, again, part of my conversation with James from AirTree was just discussing from an AirTree perspective into their investment in the business. And, obviously you spoke about, a lot of the things that initially got them interested was sort of being purpose-led and I guess the mission. And then obviously sort of looking under the hood and sort of realizing what a great business you were building as well. But one of the things that he mentioned that really sort of struck out to him from board meetings, and even just both you and Jonathan as founders, is your sort of obsession with understanding customer pain points and sort of customer workflows and all of those sort of things as well. Just really curious, especially when you're operating a startup that's growing so quickly, it can be really hard to lose sight of being in close touch with customers on a day-to-day basis. Are there any mechanisms that you use to ensure that you're continuously, getting those feedback loops or continuously staying close to your customers so you can keep improving in terms of your workflows or keep understanding customer pain points?
Yeah, there absolutely are. I mean, one of the most important ones is we have what we call effectively our customer resolution council, which is weekly and always chaired by Jonathan and myself. And unfortunately, it's dealing with the sort of the negative consequences or generally kind of negative customer issues. But we use that to resolve any issues that have otherwise been able to be resolved by our operational teams or through any other process. Sometimes these come down to disputed claims. Sometimes just sort of there are complaints. We're tens of thousands of policies. Unfortunately, there are. Sometimes we get things wrong, and sometimes we could have done things better, and sometimes customers do strange things as well. And so we use that forum on a weekly basis to work through customer issues, and it's a formal sort of structured way to ensure that A, we get good outcomes for customers, but B, Jonathan and I are very hands-on in product, and so learnings that come from there, we're able to, I guess, kind of appropriately turn up and turn down investments in product innovations that may ensure that issue doesn't happen again, for example. So that's kind of a really structured way. I think the other thing, if I cast my mind back to day one and that sort of bootstrap mentality, there was a period of a good sort of 6 or 9 months where if a customer called up, it was very much online sales and it was travel insurance for a long time, and then we brought on car insurance. But when customers called up, it would quite often be Jonathan or I answering the phone. And we had engineers, we had anybody in the business could sort of answer the phone. I mean, we had training and all those sorts of things and processes in place. But for a year, it was a culture where we were all very, very connected to customers, and we would trial technology. I'm sort of, one of the stories that always comes to mind is in 2017, we had this technology that would effectively transcribe. If a customer couldn't get through, they could leave a message and it would transcribe it, turn it into a ticket to be actioned by somebody. And sometimes you'd see these on a weekend or out of hours, and they'd flash up on, I think it was maybe pre-Slack, maybe it was in Slack. They'd flash up on your phone, and you'd get these sort of slightly garbled messages about legs falling off and really awful sounding things. And you think, oh my goodness, you call the customer back and they'd say, I was just trying to update my credit card online. and so you'd have these 5 p.m. Saturday kind of mini heart attacks and then find out that everything was okay. But it was, I guess, culturally, this was a business where everybody and anybody would interact and serve customers. That's we can't continue to do that to that degree today. We've grown, and we have an ops team who certainly do a much better job than Jonathan and I would have been doing back in 2016. But I do think that there is it's kind of a benefit of our culture that everybody at some point in time has served customers, and is still remains very, very close to customers on an informal level as well as through structured processes.
Extremely mindful of time because I feel like I can talk to you all day. So I guess the final thing that I wanted to touch on with you during this interview was obviously your sort of fundraising journey as well. So Again, do you sort of mind sharing what your sort of fundraising journey has been to date?
Yep, sure. I mean, like everything we've probably talked about today, I would say it's quite a learning experience. We did come from with heavily sort of product backgrounds, I guess, and we weren't, you sort of corporate financy folks, and so we had to learn a lot. We bootstrapped at the beginning. Hollard gave us some seed capital once we'd proven the technology back in 2016, and then that kept us going until we did a Series A in 2018. And I think that's really the first time that we sort of engaged with VCs and really sort of actually got under the hood of a structured fundraising process. We did it independently, so we didn't go to advisors. We just sort of, I guess we felt as though we had enough network, and we'd had a few inbounds by then as well. And we set about really focusing ourselves on trying to find a strong VC lead with a bit of coaching from some externals to help us work through that. Just sort of friends and family really, and we met all of the top tier, and I think we quickly realized that there were some teams within VCs with whom we connected and whom we could imagine being an extension of our team. Because you go capital, there's lots of places to get money, right? I guess for a lead, you sort of think about giving up board seats and those sorts of things. And so really the decision for us came down to, and I'd encourage everybody else to think about it this way, and going, who do you want to hire to be on your board? And who do you imagine working with? And who is going to help you manage and grow that business? And think of it as what's the sort of talent, what's the talent you can bring into your team, as opposed to what's the funding that you can bring into your team. And we've never looked back after since 2018 and deciding to work with AirTree. Awesome. I mean, not just plugging them, but for us, culturally, really strong alignment. Very, I guess, they're a diverse team, but the way they sort of challenge and question things works really well for us, works really well with us and our own internal culture. And it's, we have a really productive board, but also all of this additional value add by being able to work and tap into the broader AirTree team. We picked up just over 19 million in late 2018 as that Series A. We did a top up just earlier on this year, really to fully fund our Australian business to break even. And at some point, again, it's a bit like, when you asked the question earlier about when did you decide to launch Open alongside Huddle, I guess the third horizon for us is when do we and how do we achieve that international expansion that's also driving some of our ambition. And that's that I think that will sort of tie in with our Series B. At some point, we'll do a Series B, and it will be, I think, closely tied to us to moving into some additional overseas markets.
I do want to sort of touch on the top up or the extension, Series A extension piece, but also a really big fan of AirTree and James as well. I think they're fantastic partners to bring on. But obviously one of the things that's quite evident from speaking to you is I think you're very deliberate in the partners that you sort of look for, and when you speak about what's the investor that you want to hire to your board. Investors are generally the one employee that you can't really fire. So definitely a very, very important decision. But again, for anyone who's kind of going through that process and has, I guess, the good fortune of being able to decide which VC partner that they want to go with, do you have any advice in terms of what are things that they should look for? Or again, what are there particular things that built conviction for you that AirTree and James were the right people to bring on board?
I think the thing that stood out for us the most with AirTree, and I think it was head and shoulders above others that we met, and it was just their desire and I guess willingness to want to understand insurance. Like insurance is, I think speaking to other founders, it's a common frustration, I think, is that as a founder, lots of people pop up in your world and they're really confident about how much they understand your business or your vertical, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And I think AirTree came to us and they said, we don't get this space. We don't really know anything about insurance, but would you be up for working with us over the next week or two and teaching us everything we could possibly know about insurance, and helping our analysts really understand everything from reinsurance to risk sharing, quota shares, all of the reg reform, all of the complicated things that are going on in that world. Because whilst we might have points of view, we don't really understand it, but we really want to. And we'd had enough conversations with them to sort of think that was a worthwhile bet to take. And so that it was their kind of I guess, A, understand, really sort of putting their hand up saying, we just don't understand this space. And B, their willingness to want to get under the covers, that I think made us lean in. I said there are other folks out there who either do know a lot about it, and that can be challenging sometimes because you might have different points of view, but it can be quite productive. But also there's just a lot of people. There are people out there that maybe think they know lots about an industry, and again that's challenging as well, because it's harder to go on a journey with somebody when they're in that segment.
Yeah, so, I mean, when I spoke to James, he just spoke so passionately about the opportunity insurance and a lot of what you kind of mentioned as well in terms of like the reason why insurance exists in the world. And I didn't realize that he was so deeply invested, but I can understand where that comes from now. So a final question for me, I know we're already at time, so final question, we might just jump into one audience Q&A. The decision, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, to do a top up or an extension rather than going through a full round. Do you want to again talk through what was that sort of thought process from your perspective in terms of just understanding what you kind of needed to get to that next stage, or deciding to do an extension rather than go through the process of doing a full round?
Yeah, sure. I think the main, I guess the crux of it is we had planned at some point in 2020 to, I guess, to make some decisions about how we might expand internationally and how we might grow through I guess, whether it's through other channels or through other markets. And I think what we decided, COVID came along in March, and we could sort of look ahead at our runway, and you could see the Australian business, very close to break even. And so it just made sense to say, with so much uncertainty in the world, let's put off the B because we don't really know what the world's going to look like, or when exactly we'll be tackling some of those other opportunities. And let's do an extension to ensure that we just sort of taking care of the Australian P&L and the Australian part of the business. So it was a fairly, in hindsight, it feels like a fairly simple decision. I think at the time, I mean, let's be real, it was February, March, and the world was sort of somewhat looking like quite chaotic. So there was certainly a bit of angst around decisions that had to be made around that time, and we very quickly went to the Sequoia capital view of the world. The good time, RIP the good times, and let's plan and brace ourselves for any eventuality. In reality, what happened over the subsequent 6 months was our revenues went up. Our pay-as-you-drive price products became more popular due to COVID, and we've had some of the sort of strongest months we've ever had. But at the time, we were making decisions based on a potentially kind of a much tougher set of trading conditions.
Yeah, and much easier to go back to your existing investors rather than having to, I guess, spend the time in terms of going to the market as well, especially when things were just, a little bit all over the place in February, March. All right, Jason, we're well and truly over time, so my apologies on that. But I might just pick out one question that's been submitted. It is from Henry Tamsett, who says, just leading on from what we just discussed, how has the effects of COVID impacted insurance, and how has that changed the way that you sort of operate Open and Huddle, if at all?
So I think I guess there's lots of impacts. I think, I mean, we formerly sold travel insurance. We won't be selling it probably for any time soon, and we stopped selling it very, very quickly in February last year. So I mean, there are some risks that just became fairly uninsurable, and those markets sort of closed. As I said before, the biggest opportunity is big shifts in behavior. From an insurer's perspective, have a dramatic change. Just change risk. People driving less, fewer accidents. People people spending more time in the home. A different risk profile for the home office and for insuring homes and contents. So there's that creates challenges, but for a challenger like us, it just creates lots of opportunities. I think perhaps one of the biggest opportunities is in the broader ecosystem as well. I mean, we're a manufacturer, so we want to collect data and understand these risks, price them better, and create experiences that either help customers feel like they've got more reliable cover, or they can access cover at a better price. The big call out I would make is that we can't solve all of those problems alone, and I think there will be lots of opportunities within the broader fintech and insurtech ecosystem for others to be able to capture data and productize some of that data, some of that information in a way that enables insurers like us or product manufacturers like us and insurers to be able to respond to some of these new and emerging risks. So I'm pretty excited that we'll see a stronger ecosystem perhaps start to emerge around insurtech in a post-COVID world, which is very exciting.
Fantastic. Watch this space. Jason, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your experience and insights. For anyone that wants to find out more, say hello, get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can check out Huddle at huddle.com.au. And otherwise, if you want to reach out, chat with me directly. I'm not a massive Twitter user, but you can reach out on Twitter and via LinkedIn and any of those other channels. We're pretty good at responding. So yeah, just reach out to us across any of those socials.
Perfect. I will make sure I add those notes add those links to the show notes at startupplaybook.co. Once again, Jason, thanks so much for coming on, and thank you everyone for tuning in live this morning.
Thank you. Thanks, Rohit.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to episode 134 of the Startup Playbook podcast. As always, full show notes from this interview will be available at startupplaybook.co. As COVID restrictions have started to ease in Melbourne, I'm slowly going to start moving back to in-person interviews. And first up is Gabby Levich, who was one of the co-founders of the Catch Group, which was recently acquired by Wesfarmers for $230 million. I'm really excited to be sitting down with Gabby next week for the podcast, and the recording will be published to all major channels on Thursday evening. But in the meantime, if you enjoyed this interview, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.